3 years ago, my friend David and I decided to go on a camping trip to the Carpathian Mountains in Romania. We were looking for peace and quiet, a place far from the noise of the city and the chaos of life. We packed our bags, flew from London to Bucharest, then rented a car and drove for 5 hours until we reached a completely remote area. The forest was dense, pine trees surrounding us on every side, the air cool and refreshing. We found a small clearing beside a stream and set up our tent there. Everything was perfect on the first day. We lit a fire, grilled some meat, and drank whiskey under a sky full of stars. We laughed a lot that night, as if the world belonged only to us. But on the second night, everything changed. I woke up suddenly around 3 in the morning to dead silence. I realized then that I couldn't hear anything at all. No wind, no rustling leaves, no sound of the nearby stream. Even David's breathing, which I could clearly hear the previous night, had completely vanished. The silence was heavy, suffocating, as if the whole forest was holding its breath. I whispered, "David, are you awake?" No response. I poked my head out of my sleeping bag and looked toward him. He was lying on his back, his eyes wide open, staring at the tent ceiling. His lips were moving slowly but without sound. "David," I said louder this time. He turned his head toward me very slowly in an unnatural way, as if his neck wasn't working properly. Then he put his finger to his lips, signaling silence. I noticed his eyes were different, as if something else was looking through them. I opened my mouth to ask what was wrong, but he shook his head firmly, and this time I heard him whisper in a terrified voice, "Don't make a sound. They're here." I froze in place. Who were they? I looked around in the darkness of the tent, trying to see anything, and suddenly I saw them. Shadows moving outside the tent. They weren't tree shadows. They were human shapes, impossibly tall and thin. They walked slowly among the trees, sometimes stopping as if listening. There were 4 or 5 of them, moving in complete silence. Suddenly, one of them stopped right beside our tent. I saw its shadow fall on the tent fabric. It was so close I could hear its breathing, a slow, raspy sound, like air escaping from an old balloon. The shadow began moving around the tent slowly and as if inspecting it. It walked strangely, jerkingly, as if its joints were reversed. I don't know how long we stayed like that, minutes, hours. David and I stood frozen, trying not to make a sound. My heart was pounding so hard I was afraid they would hear it. At one point, I felt something touching the tent fabric from the outside, a long finger pulling the fabric gently. I shut my eyes tightly, certain it was the end. But suddenly, the sounds returned. I heard the wind come back suddenly, the rustling of leaves, the babbling of the water. I opened my eyes slowly. The early morning light was creeping through the tent opening. The shadows were gone. I looked at David. He was still awake, his face pale and his eyes bloodshot. I whispered, "Did you see what I saw?" He looked at me and said in a trembling voice, "I've been awake since midnight." I woke up to the sound of footsteps outside the tent. When I looked through the small opening, I saw them. They were tall, about 3 meters, terrifyingly thin. Their faces white and completely featureless, just skin stretched over a skull, no eyes, no nose, no mouth. Then he added, his voice choked, The worst part was that they were trying to learn to speak. They were opening and closing their mouths, and distorted sounds came out, as if they were imitating human speech, but didn't understand its meaning. We packed our things in 5 minutes and left. We didn't speak the entire way to the airport. To this day, 3 years later, we never talk about that trip. But sometimes when I'm alone at night, I remember that silence and those shadows, and I wonder if they're still there, in that forest, learning how to speak. I travel a lot because of my job as a marketing consultant. Last year, I was sent to Istanbul to attend a 3-day conference. The company arranged my stay at a small old hotel in the Sultanahmet district. The hotel was beautiful from the outside, built in the old Ottoman style, but something about it made me feel uneasy from the very first moment. I arrived late at night. The receptionist was an old man with a wrinkled face and a piercing gaze. He gave me the key to room 307 on the 3rd floor. I noticed he was trembling slightly when he handed me the key. I went up to the room. It was old and worn but clean. The wallpaper was peeling in some places and the bed creaked with every movement. But I was so exhausted I didn't care. I showered and fell asleep immediately. In the middle of the night, I woke up to the sound of crying. A low, muffled sound like it was coming from the wall next to my bed. I looked at my watch. It was 3:07 in the morning. I grumbled about noisy neighbors and tried to go back to sleep. But the crying continued. It was a woman's crying, sad and indescribably desperate, and suddenly it stopped. Then I heard another sound, a scratching sound on the wall. Faint at first, then it grew stronger, as if someone was digging into the wall with their fingernails from inside. I moved closer to the wall and put my ear against it. The sound was coming from inside the wall itself, not from the next room. I felt a chill running through my body and quickly backed away. The next night, the same thing. I woke up at 3:07 a.m. to the sound of crying, followed by the scratching sound. This time the scratching was closer, as if it was moving through the wall toward my bed. I could hear it moving slowly. Scratch, silence, scratch, silence. As if something was trying to find a way out. I decided to say something to the receptionist in the morning, but I was busy with the conference. On the third night, I was terrified to go back to the room, but I was exhausted and had no other choice, and I lay in bed staring at the ceiling waiting for 3:07. The hour came, the crying began, but it was no longer muffled. It was clear and loud, coming from the corner of the room where the wardrobe stood. Then it stopped suddenly. A heavy silence followed. Then I heard the wardrobe door slowly opening with its familiar metallic creaking. I was certain I had closed it before going to sleep. I sat up in bed, staring into the darkness of the room. The faint moonlight was slipping through the window, just enough for me to see the wardrobe door slightly open. Then I saw something coming out. It wasn't a whole person, it was a hand. Just a pale, thin hand with long, broken nails crawling on the floor like a white spider. Behind it, a dark shape began seeping from the darkness of the wardrobe, a shapeless mass moving across the floor toward my bed. I screamed and jumped out of bed. I ran toward the door, but it was locked. I pulled the handle hard. The door wouldn't move. It was locked from the outside. I turned and saw the dark mass approaching me, and suddenly it formed into the shape of a woman wearing an old, torn white dress, her face hidden by long black hair. She reached her hand toward me. I closed my eyes and screamed at the top of my lungs, and suddenly I heard the sound of keys and the door opened. The receptionist was standing there, his face pale. He looked at me, then at the corner of the room where the woman was. I said to him in a trembling voice, "Didn't you see her?" He looked at me with sad eyes and said something that made me shiver. "I'm sorry, I should have told you. This room belonged to the daughter of the hotel's previous owner. She died suffocated inside the wardrobe 40 years ago. She was 7 years old. Her name is Nesrin." I asked him in a choked voice as I put on my shoes and grabbed my bag, "Then why do you open this room?" He said in a whisper, "Because she chooses who she calls. We only open it when she asks." I left the hotel that night. I slept at the airport. Since then, whenever I hear scratching sounds at night, I remember Nesrin, and I wonder if she's still there, waiting for someone to hear her crying. Last summer, I traveled with my wife Elena and our 2 children to the city of San Miguel de Allende in Mexico. We wanted to witness the famous mask festival where people wear amazing costumes and colorful wooden masks. The atmosphere was festive, full of music, dancing, and food. We felt like we were in a beautiful dream. On the 3rd day of the holiday, my younger son Lucas, who was 6 years old, got lost in the crowd. We searched for him for half an hour in absolute panic. Finally, we found him standing in front of a small shop on a quiet side street. He was staring through the window at something with intense focus. I breathed a sigh of relief and ran toward him. When I reached him, I saw what had captivated him. It was a handmade doll shop. Small wooden dolls about half a meter tall, dressed in colorful traditional Mexican costumes. but their faces were strange. The masks were painted with smiles that were too wide, wider than they should be, revealing rows of sharp teeth. I shrugged. Weird folk art, I said to myself. I took Lucas and we returned to the hotel. But that night, I woke up to the sound of whispering coming from the children's room next door. I went to see and found Lucas talking in his sleep, or so it seemed. He was sitting in his bed, but his eyes were closed. He was whispering words I didn't understand and giggling softly. I gently shook him. "Lucas, wake up." He slowly opened his eyes and looked at me. He said in a normal voice, "Daddy, my new friend is here. He wants to play with me." I looked around the room. There was no one there. I said to him, "Go back to sleep. There's no one here, champ." But he insisted. "But he is here, Daddy. He's standing behind you." I turned quickly. There was nothing except the window curtain moving slightly from the breeze. An unexplainable chill ran through me. I returned to my room, but I didn't sleep well. I kept tossing and turning, Lucas's words echoing in my ears. The next day, we were walking around the handicraft market. I was looking for the owner of the doll shop in front of which we had found Lucas, to see if he had bought or taken anything. But something strange happened. Every time we asked someone about the shop, they changed the subject or quickly walked away. Finally, an old woman selling candles grabbed my arm and said in a low voice, "You're talking about Don Emilio's shop. Don't go there. It closed years ago. The man made haunted dolls. He used to put things inside them." "What kind of things?" I asked. She looked around, then whispered, "He used to bury them in the children's cemetery for 3 nights under the full moon. They say the souls of children enter the dolls. That's why their smiles are so wide. They're happy because they've found new bodies." I laughed nervously and walked away. Local superstitions, that's all. But Eleanor was frightened. She insisted we go back to the hotel and leave early in the morning. On that final night, I was awakened by a soft knocking on our room door. I looked at the clock. It was 3 in the morning. I opened the door and found no one. But I heard the sound of muffled laughter coming from the children's room. I ran and opened the door. The scene I saw made my heart stop. Lucas and his older sister Maria, who was 8 years old, were sitting in the middle of the room playing. But with them, there were 3 wooden dolls, the same dolls I had seen in the shop. 3 dolls wearing colorful Mexican costumes with wide smiles and sharp teeth. They were sitting in a circle. One was holding Lucas's hand. The problem was I had not brought any dolls into the hotel. We hadn't bought anything. Lucas wasn't holding anything when we found him. I ran and picked up the children and woke Elena. We packed our bags in minutes. I told the front desk clerk there was a mistake with my reservation and that we had to leave immediately. While my wife was putting the children in the taxi, I went back to get our passports from the room. When I opened the door to the room, I saw the 3 dolls lined up on the bed, their faces directed toward me. And worse, the doll in the middle, the one that had been holding Lucas's hand, was smiling. But its smile was wider than when I entered, wider than it had been the night before, as if it was happy to see me. I slammed the door and ran. I didn't look back. We returned to London that same day. Weeks passed, and things began returning to normal. Until one night, as I was reading a bedtime story to Lucas, he said something that made the blood freeze in my veins. "Daddy, my friend from Mexico says he misses me. He says he's coming to visit us soon. Can he sleep in my room?" I looked at the window. It was slightly open, and on the windowsill I saw small scratch marks, as if something small with rough nails had climbed up to see who was inside.